Welcome to Volume 3 of the Quantum Quill Story edition of Moby-Dick. The voyage has crossed an invisible threshold. The Pequod continues her passage across the world's oceans, but the purpose that drives her has begun to change. What once appeared to be a whaling expedition now reveals itself as something far more personal and far more dangerous. Captain Ahab's pursuit of the white whale grows stronger with each passing day. The crew has witnessed the force of his determination. The gold coin remains fixed to the mast. The promise of the hunt hangs over every watch, every lowering, and every horizon. Yet Moby-Dick remains beyond reach. For now. As the Pequod sails deeper into distant waters, Ishmael gains a richer understanding of life aboard the ship and of the remarkable individuals who share the voyage. Friendships deepen. Loyalties are tested. New encounters reveal both the grandeur and the brutality of the sea. At the same time, unsettling truths begin to emerge. Captain Ahab's obsession is no longer merely a private burden. It is becoming the ship's burden. The lines between duty and devotion, leadership and control, purpose and obsession begin to blur. Questions that once seemed distant now stand at the center of the voyage. Can a single purpose unite a crew or destroy it? Can suffering reveal truth or distort it? And what happens when a man pursues an answer so relentlessly that it becomes more important than the lives around him? In this volume, the ocean grows stranger. The hunts become more perilous. Hidden forces aboard the Pequod reveal themselves, and the white whale's shadow begins to fall more heavily across every soul on the ship. The sea stretches endlessly before them. The hunt continues, and destiny draws nearer with every mile. Act 1. By then, Ahab understood that obsession alone could not keep a ship alive. It could command a man. It could inflame a crew. It could nail a gold coin to a mast and turn sailors' eyes toward a single monstrous absence. But it could not trim sail, coil line, fill casks, mend boats, or keep men from brooding themselves into mutiny while the white whale remained somewhere beyond the rim of the world. So, the Pequod resumed the outward shape of ordinary whaling. Ahab, who had torn the mask from the voyage and shown us the burning face beneath, now fastened the mask back into place. He ordered the mastheads manned. He demanded watchfulness for any spout, any fin, any ripple that might betray a whale below. He spoke of oil, of weather, of grounds, of the common business that had brought the ship from Nantucket. Yet no man was deceived, least of all Starbuck. The first mate carried obedience like a wound. His body served the ship, his skill preserved it, his voice answered command, but something inward stood apart, resisting. He had not forgotten the quarterdeck oath. He had not forgiven it. And Ahab, with the terrible intelligence of a man who studies souls as other captains study currents, knew it. For this reason, the work became more than work. It became containment. Labor kept the crew's hunger pointed outward. It fed their need for profit. It gave their hands purpose, while Ahab's true purpose waited in the dark. One heavy afternoon, under a sky the color of tarnished lead, Queequeg and I sat together, weaving a mat. The ship seemed half asleep. Men leaned against bulwarks or sat in loose attitudes of idleness. The sea lay dull and breathless. Even the sails hung with a tired patience, as though the wind itself had forgotten us. Somewhere below, a block creaked. Far off, water slapped the hull with a lazy, repeating sound. Queequeg worked the wooden sword through the strands with slow, careless force. I passed the line back and forth. The task was simple, almost childish, yet my mind entered it strangely. There were the fixed threads, stretched and waiting. There was my hand, moving freely within the limits set before it. There was Queequeg's sword, striking with small variations, altering the final shape by chance, pressure, and impulse. "Do you ever think," I asked him, "that everything is already woven before we touch it?" Queequeg did not look up. "No." "You believe we choose?" "Some. Only some." He pressed the sword down. "Wind choose, sea choose, captain choose, whale choose, man still pull oar." That answer satisfied him. It did not satisfy me, yet perhaps it was better than philosophy. The dull thud of the sword continued. Then the cry came. It fell from above, with such sudden wild music that my hand froze on the line. "There she blows." Every idle body sprang alive. The Pequod erupted, men ran, feet hammered, orders rang from aft. Sailors dropped from the mastheads like dark birds returning to earth. Blocks screamed as boats were prepared, lines were seized, oars were readied, harpoons flashed in hands that a moment before had hung empty and bored. The ship transformed instantly from drifting world to weapon. "Where away?" shouted Ahab. "Lee beam, 2 miles, a whole school." The cry came from Tashtego, high in the rigging, his body pitched forward against the sky, arm extended toward the horizon as if pointing at fate itself. Ahab's face blazed. "Stand by the boats." The 3 mates moved to their commands, Starbuck to his boat, calm and severe, Stubb laughing around his pipe, urging his men with cheerful insults, Flask nearly dancing with impatience, red with eagerness, ready to attack the entire ocean if it would only hold still long enough. Queequeg rose beside me, all dream gone from him. In an instant, he was pure readiness. His harpoon lay in his hand as naturally as a thought. "Come," he said. I followed. But before the boats dropped, before the crews could spring over the side, every eye was drawn aft. Ahab stood near the starboard quarter. Beside him were 5 men none of us had openly known, though some had whispered of hidden shapes aboard since Nantucket. They seemed to have risen out of the ship itself, silent, dark, foreign to every ordinary rhythm of the deck. Their leader stood apart. Fadala, tall and shadowed, with a white turban, coiled about his head like a pale flame above black cloth. A hush struck the crew harder than any command. Stubbs' pipe lowered. Flask stared. Starbuck's face tightened with recognition. Not of the man, perhaps, but of the deception. Ahab did not explain. "Lower away," he said. No one moved. For one terrible instant, the ship seemed balanced between discipline and astonishment. Then Ahab's voice cracked across the deck. "Lower away!" The boats dropped. Ropes shrieked through blocks. Wood struck water. Men leapt, landed, seized oars, pushed off. The Pequod rose above us, vast and ivory dark against the clouded sky, while 4 boats now spread over the sea instead of 3. Ahab had his own boat, his own crew, his own hidden instruments. Starbuck called across the water, "Captain Ahab!" "Spread out," Ahab shouted back. "Cover the school." But those men— "Your duty is ahead, Mr. Starbuck." The rebuke landed cleanly. Starbuck said no more. His jaw hardened. Our boat surged forward. Queequeg stood in the bow. Starbuck held the steering oar. The crew bent to their work, backs rising and falling, breath sharpening. Every stroke pulled us farther from the ship and closer to the patch of troubled water where the whales had gone down. I rowed as if chased by the thing we pursued. Around us, the other boats widened their arcs. Stubbs' voice drifted over the swells, half sermon, half jest. Pull, my infants, pull, my delicate blossoms, snap your bones politely if you must, but pull. From Flask came pure command, hot and eager. Lay me on their backs. And from Ahab's boat came something darker, low words, hard words, words swallowed by wind and water before they reached us, though the force of them seemed to travel across the sea. Fadalla rowed with frightening precision. His crew moved like one body, silent and powerful. Ahab stood at the stern, braced by his living leg and ivory limb, steering as though he had never been maimed. For the first time, I understood that the injury had not lessened him in his own mind. It had concentrated him. The whales surfaced ahead. At first, I saw only a trembling brightness, a disturbance like breath made visible. Then dark backs rolled through the water, immense, smooth, and shining. Spouts rose and drifted, pale against the lowering sky. The air filled with the warm, oily scent of living Leviathan. Every boat quickened. "Steady," Starbuck whispered. His voice was low, but it carried more authority than shouting. Long strokes, quiet now. The crew obeyed. The whales swam ahead, half seen, through vapor and swell. Their bodies seemed too large for the world that held them. One rolled near enough that I glimpsed the great dark curve of its back vanish beneath us like a moving island. My hands tightened on the oar. Fear entered me cleanly then. Not panic, not imagination, but the plain knowledge that men in thin boats had no natural right to challenge such beings. Starbuck felt it too, perhaps. Or rather, he respected it. "Now," he said softly, "stand ready." Queequeg rose. At that moment, the weather changed. A gust struck the sail. Mist swept over the water. The clean shapes of the whales blurred. The sea darkened in patches, as though shadows below were rising to meet the sky. "Hold," Starbuck said. But from another quarter came Flask's cry, furious with excitement. There, give it to him." Then a shout from Stubbs' boat. Then another. The hunt dissolved into fragments. Oars flashing, waves lifting, men crying out, whales sounding and rising, vapor bursting, wood creaking under strain. Our boat rushed forward through a low wall of mist. I could no longer see the Pequod. I could barely see Ahab's boat. Only Starbuck's face remained fixed before us, intent and pale. "Queequeg," he whispered. The harpooner drew back his arm. The whale's back rose, a mountain of life. "Give it to him," Queequeg threw. The iron flew. For one breath, the world held still. Then everything broke. The lines screamed. The boat jerked. A blast of vapor struck hot across my face. Something vast rolled beneath us, lifting the bow as if the seafloor itself had risen. Men shouted. The sails snapped loose. The boat twisted broadside. Foam swallowed the world. Then came the squall. Wind and rain descended together with savage suddenness. The whale vanished. The line went slack, or was cut. I could not tell. Water poured over the gunwales. Oars scattered. The boat lurched, filled, and sagged beneath us. "Bail!" someone shouted. "No use," said Starbuck. His calm frightened me more than the storm. The boat was swamped, but floating. Barely. We clung to what we could. The sea rose around our knees, inside the hull. Rain hammered the water flat in one place and tore it open in another. The other boats were gone from sight. The Pequod was gone from sight. The world had narrowed to grey water, broken wood, cold breath, and the stubborn fact of not yet being dead. Queequeg found a lantern. Starbuck, after several failed attempts, managed to light it beneath his coat. The flame trembled like a soul, reluctant to remain in the body. He fixed it to a pole and gave it to Queequeg, who held it upright in the storm. There sat my friend, drenched, silent, and immovable, raising a frail light into a darkness too vast to notice it. I laughed, not from amusement, from the sudden absurdity of being alive in such a condition. Starbuck looked at me sharply. "Are you hurt?" "No." "Then save your breath." That made me laugh again. All night we drifted. The storm spent itself slowly. Cold entered the bones. Speech became difficult. Men hunched into themselves. Queequeg still held the pole long after the flame had died, as if hope remained a duty even when its sign had gone out. Near dawn, a sound came through the mist. A groan, a creak, the deep laboring voice of a ship. Queequeg lifted his head first, then Starbuck, then all of us. Out of the fog, the Pequod emerged, bearing down upon us with terrible majesty, her hull enormous, her bow cutting toward our wrecked little boat. "Over!" Starbuck cried. We threw ourselves into the sea. The ship passed so near that her shadow covered us like night. Our damaged boat vanished beneath her bow, then burst up splintered in her wake. Lines were thrown. Hands seized us. One by one, we were dragged aboard. I landed hard on the deck, coughing seawater, shaking, alive. Stubbs stood nearby, dry enough to be irritating, pipe already lit. "Well," he said, "you've had your baptism." Flask laughed. Queequeg merely wrung water from his hair. Ahab stood apart. His boat had returned safely. Fadala and the others remained behind him, silent as shadows. The captain looked not at the rescued men, not at the broken boat, not at Starbuck, whose face carried both exhaustion and restrained accusation. Ahab looked toward the horizon. The whales were gone. The first lowering had ended in failure, yet failure did not diminish him. If anything, it seemed to deepen the fire. That morning I went below and made my will. Queequeg witnessed it with solemn patience, though he appeared puzzled by the ceremony. "You give me things?" he asked. "If I die?" "You die. Things no help." "They may help you." He considered this. "Then I take." When it was done, I felt strangely peaceful. A man who has formally arranged his own death gains a curious advantage over fear. He has stepped ahead of it, signed its papers, and returned to work. On deck, the broken boat was being examined. The men talked, joked, cursed, argued over details, and made light of what had nearly killed us. That, too, was seamanship. Ahab's hidden crew was no longer hidden. Fadala moved openly now, though never commonly. He seemed less a sailor than an omen granted human shape. Wherever he stood, space gathered around him. Men watched him from the corners of their eyes and looked away quickly if he turned. As for Ahab, he had crossed another threshold. He had not merely sworn us to his private hunt. He had prepared for it in secret. He had smuggled aboard men answerable only to him. He had lowered with them into danger, like a king descending into battle with assassins at his side. The Pequod sailed on, but something in the ship's moral frame had shifted. Until then, Ahab's obsession had been terrifying. Now it was organized, equipped, armed. and we, who had laughed at death in the morning because terror had become too large for any other response, understood at last that this voyage would not be turned aside by reason, warning, failure, or storm. The hunt had begun. Act 2. After the first lowering, the Pequod did not grow quieter. She grew stranger. The ship had always carried mystery, but now mystery had names and faces. Fedallah walked openly beneath the same sky as the rest of us, yet seemed never truly among us. His crew kept to themselves, appearing when Ahab required them, vanishing when he did not. No one knew where they slept, how they had been hidden so long, or by what private bargain they belonged so completely to the captain. Stubb claimed not to care. "I've seen worse things come aboard ships," he said. "What things?" I asked. He puffed thoughtfully. "Bad cooks, worse omen than any dark man in a turban." Flask laughed. Starbuck did not. The first mate watched Fedallah with grave displeasure. It was not fear. Starbuck feared many things honestly, and therefore was not ruled by them. What troubled him was the hiddenness of it all. The secret crew, the secret boat, the secret compact beneath the lawful voyage. One evening he confronted Ahab near the quarterdeck. I was near enough to hear fragments. "These men were never shipped in Nantucket," Starbuck said. "They are aboard now." That does not answer. It answers enough for the sea. For the sea, perhaps, not for conscience. Ahab turned slowly. "Mr. Starbuck, keep your conscience trimmed like a lamp, and it may serve you. Hold it too near the powder, and it may destroy us all." "My conscience does not threaten the ship." "No," Ahab said, "it threatens me." The words were almost quiet. That made them worse. Starbuck's face tightened, but he bowed and withdrew. From that day forward, the distance between them widened, not in conduct, for both remained outwardly disciplined, but in the invisible architecture of command. Ahab had crossed into open tyranny of purpose. Starbuck had crossed into inward resistance. Between them sailed the ship. Days and weeks unfolded. The Pequod passed through whaling grounds with the steady hunger of a thing built to search. The Azores fell behind. The Cape Verde waters passed beneath our keel. The ship moved onward toward lonelier seas, and the world became less familiar by degrees. The crew settled again into labor, yet every labor now seemed touched by interpretation. A broken line became a warning, a dark bird became a sign, a calm sea became deception, a sudden gust became command. This was Ahab's influence, not merely that he sought meaning in all things, but that the rest of us began to do the same. One moonlit night, when the ship moved through a silver stillness so complete it seemed unlawful to speak, a cry fell from aloft. "There she blows!" Men sprang up, as if from graves. The sound had come from Fedallah. He stood at the masthead, his turban pale in the moonlight, his arm extended toward the horizon. Far ahead, so faint it might have been a trick of light, rose a delicate fountain of vapor. It gleamed, vanished, and left the sea blank. Ahab was on deck before half the crew had found their feet. "Where?" "Dead ahead," Fedallah answered. "Set everything." The order ran through the ship. Canvas climbed the masts. Ropes snapped taut. The Pequod leaned into the night and began to fly. No boats were lowered. Even Ahab did not command that madness in darkness. Instead, the whole ship chased the apparition, driving forward beneath a moon that made the sea looked like polished bone. But the spout did not appear again. By dawn, men were muttering. "Could have been mist," said one. "Could have been a whale," said another. "Could have been him," whispered a third. No one needed to ask whom he meant. The next night, it came again. This time, more men saw it. A pale jet rising far ahead, impossibly calm, impossibly precise, then dissolving into moonlight. Again the ship crowded sail. Again the sea swallowed the sign. By the third appearance, superstition had become stronger than doubt. The white whale, men said, leading us, watching us, waiting. I tried to resist such talk, but the ocean makes reason porous. Under a city's lamps, a man may laugh at ghosts. Beneath lonely stars, with black water breathing under the hull, he listens differently. Queequeg remained unmoved. "You think it is Moby-Dick?" I asked. "Maybe." "You do not care." "I care when whale near boat." "That is all?" He shrugged. "Far ghost cannot bite." It was a useful philosophy, but difficult to keep. The spirit spout returned again and again, sometimes after several nights of absence, always ahead, always unreachable. It became a pale summons drawing us onward. Ahab seldom spoke of it, but his face grew sharper each time it appeared. He watched the horizon as a starving man watches a locked door. Then the weather changed. The mild seas ended. We entered rougher waters, and the Cape winds came upon us with their old violence. The Pequod, which had floated through calm like a ghost, became suddenly all muscle and struggle. Waves struck her sides. Spray flew over the decks. The sky collapsed into iron. Birds gathered in the rigging. Black, ragged, stubborn things that clung there like messengers from wrecked worlds. Men cursed them and shook lines to drive them off. They returned. "Bad company," said Stubb, squinting upward. "Then they suit us," Flask replied. Through rain, sleet, and screaming wind, Ahab remained on deck. His ivory leg locked into its socket, one hand gripping the shroud, his coat stiff with salt, his scar pale against his storm-darkened face. He looked less like a captain weathering a gale than a man challenging the entire machinery of creation to show its hand. Starbuck begged him once to go below. "Your strength is not endless, sir." Ahab did not look at him. "Then let it spend itself where it is owed." "You owe the ship your life. I owe the world my answer." "To what question?" At that, Ahab turned. For a moment, the two men stood nearly face to face, rain streaming between them. "To the question that struck me," Ahab said, "to the force that tore me and called itself accident, to the blank wall behind all suffering." Starbuck's voice lowered. "And if there is no wall, if there is only sea and beast and providence beyond your command?" Ahab smiled bitterly. "Then I will strike the sea, the beast, and providence together." Starbuck stepped back, as if the words themselves had heat. "You cannot win such a battle." "No," Ahab said, "but I can refuse to kneel." The storm swallowed the rest. In those days, Ahab became more terrible, not because he raged, but because he endured. He scarcely slept. When he did go below, he sat upright over charts while water dripped from his coat onto the cabin floor. More than once, Starbuck found him there, eyes closed but body rigid, one hand clenched around a lantern, his head thrown back beneath the swinging compass. "Sleeping?" Stubb asked when Starbuck told him. "No," Starbuck said. "Listening." "To what?" to himself. Stubb considered this. Dangerous voice, that. Meanwhile, the ship pressed onward. The spirit spout appeared even in rough weather, faint, pale, and distant beyond the storm's torn curtains. Each sighting renewed the crew's fever. Men who had mocked the idea now watched for it with religious intensity. The line between whale and omen thinned until nothing remained but pursuit. Then came the albatross. We sighted the other ship under a clearing sky, pale and weather-beaten, moving across the horizon like a wandering relic. Her sails were stained by long voyaging. Her hull showed the bruises of many seas. She seemed at first less encountered than remembered. Ahab ordered us near. The crews gathered at the rails. As the ships drew within hailing distance, Ahab lifted his voice. "Ship ahoy! Have you seen the white whale?" The question leapt across the water before any greeting, before news, before courtesy. The other captain raised a speaking trumpet. "What whale?" "Moby-Dick." At that name, something shifted aboard the stranger. Men turned. Voices murmured. The captain answered, but the wind tore half his words away. Ahab demanded more. "Speak plainly. Have you seen him?" The other captain called back something about seas far off, about a white shape, about terror or rumor. I could not tell which. Then the wind shifted sharply. The ships began to draw apart. "Hold closer!" Ahab shouted. But the weather had its own mind. The other vessel slipped behind a slant of rain and distance, her rigging blurred, her people shrinking into figures. For one moment, she seemed a messenger sent from the future. The next, she was only a ship vanishing into weather. Starbuck watched her go with troubled eyes. "Why does every answer lead him forward?" he said softly. "Because he hears only that part," I answered. He looked at me, and I was surprised by the sorrow in his face. "Yes," he said, "that is the curse." Not long after, we heard the town ho's story. It came to us by way of another meeting, another crossing of ships, another exchange of news upon the immense roadless plain of the sea. Sailors love stories at such meetings. They trade them like tobacco, knives, gossip, warnings. This one carried the weight of fate. The town ho had been a whaler out of Nantucket, crewed by hard men and commanded badly. Among her company had been a proud sailor named Steelkilt, strong, furious, unwilling to be humiliated beyond measure. Against him stood Radney, an officer whose authority had curdled into cruelty. The conflict began in small insults, as shipboard tyrannies often do. A command given sharply, a refusal answered too boldly, a blow, a punishment, a bitterness that spread through the crew like rot through timber. As the tale was told, Steelkilt endured until endurance became impossible. Radney provoked him once too often. Men whispered mutiny. Steelkilt struck back. The ship became a sealed chamber of anger, drifting across a sea that seemed to wait. Then came Moby-Dick. The white whale appeared not as rumor, but as judgment. The town ho lowered. Radney went in the boat. Steelkilt, by chance or fate, was not beside him. The whale rose. There are moments when the sea seems to deliver verdicts without language. Moby-Dick shattered the boat. Radney vanished beneath the violence he had helped summon, taken not by human revenge, but by something larger, blanker, and more terrible. The story ended there, though no story truly ends where sailors stop speaking. Around us, the men listened in silence. Ahab listened most intently of all. To others, the tale was warning. To him, it was confirmation. The white whale had become not merely his enemy, but an agent in the moral drama he had constructed. Every broken boat, every dead officer, every rumor of terror only strengthened the architecture of his belief. Starbuck saw it. "Do not make providence out of a whale," he said to him afterward. Ahab's eyes flashed. "Do not make cowardice out of prudence. I ask only that we see a creature as a creature, and I say no creature is only itself. There lies the danger. There lies the truth." They stood beneath a sky clearing after rain, the deck wet beneath them, the gold coin still nailed to the mast behind Ahab like a small sun. Starbuck looked at it. "You have bought their souls cheaply." Ahab followed his gaze. "No," he said, "I have named their hunger." That night, the crew retold the town-ho's story in fragments. Each telling altered the shape. Moby-Dick grew larger, Radney more wicked, Steelkilt more heroic, the whale less animal, more executioner. By midnight, the tale had already become legend. I lay awake long after, listening to the ship breathe. Above me, men walked the deck. Beyond them, Ahab watched the sea. And somewhere beyond all sight, perhaps near, perhaps impossibly far, the white whale moved through the darkness, not yet seen by us, but already present in every mind aboard. The hunt had begun as pursuit. Now it had become interpretation. And of all tyrannies, I began to understand, none is more dangerous than the mind that can no longer permit the world to remain unexplained. Act 3. The sea teaches strange lessons. Some are learned through hardship, others through labor. A few arrive disguised as stories. The tale of the town-ho lingered aboard the Pequod long after the voices that told it had faded. Sailors repeated it during watches, over meals, while repairing gear, while staring into darkness from the mastheads. Like all sea stories, it changed with each telling. Yet one thing remained unchanged. The white whale stood at its center. To some, he was vengeance. To others, justice. To others still, merely a whale. Ahab listened to every version, and from every version, he took the same conclusion. The hunt must continue. Weeks passed. The weather moderated. The violent seas behind the cape gradually yielded to broader swells and clearer skies. The ship entered regions where sunlight returned with almost painful brilliance. Flying fish flashed from the waves. The air softened. The horizon regained its clean blue edge. Yet peace never truly settled aboard. The Pequod carried its own weather. Ahab's presence ensured that. The captain spoke little now, but when he did, men listened with unusual attention. Even ordinary remarks acquired significance because they emerged from a mind perpetually fixed upon a single object. One afternoon, I found him studying carvings and sketches of whales gathered from various ships and ports over many years. The drawings were contradictory. Some depicted monsters, others depicted absurd distortions. Many were plainly inaccurate. Ahab stared at them all. "What do you see?" he asked without looking up. "Mostly mistakes." He nodded. "Exactly." I waited. The world rarely sees clearly. Because whales are difficult to observe? Because men are. His finger tapped one crude illustration. We look at a thing, another. We fear it, another. We desire it, another. We hate it. He looked at me, and then we call the result truth. I left unsettled, not because he was wrong, because he was right. Ahab's greatest danger lay not in madness, but in intelligence. He understood too much about human perception and too little about his own. The voyage continued. One evening, while the sea glowed beneath a copper sunset, Stubbs spotted a strange pale mass drifting upon the water. At first, it appeared lifeless. Then it moved, a giant squid. The creature floated near the ship, ghostly and unnatural, its pale body suspended beneath the surface like a drowned moon. Long arms drifted through the water. The crew gathered at the rail. Even experienced sailors grew quiet. The thing seemed less animal than apparition. Fedallah appeared beside Ahab. The Parsi watched the creature with unusual intensity. Then he spoke. "The white whale's food." Ahab's head turned sharply. "You think so?" Fedallah nodded. "Where squid goes, whale follows." The captain stared at the pale shape until darkness swallowed it. Afterward, excitement spread through the ship. The white whale felt closer, not seen, not proven, yet somehow nearer. Signs accumulated, rumors multiplied, expectation deepened. The next whale encounter came suddenly. A cry from aloft, a spout, then another. A school moving across the sea. This time, the lowering was clean. No storm, no fog, no confusion. The boats entered the water smoothly and raced toward their quarry. I found myself in Starbuck's boat again. The memory of our previous disaster remained vivid. My hands tightened around the oar. Starbuck noticed. "Afraid?" "Yes." "Good," he nodded approvingly. "Fear keeps a man honest." The whales swam hard. The boats pursued. Water flashed beneath us. The distance narrowed. At last, one enormous sperm whale separated slightly from the others. "Steady," Starbuck whispered. Queequeg rose, harpoon poised. Every movement aboard the boat slowed. The whale rolled. Its dark back gleamed. The ocean seemed to hold its breath. Then Queequeg struck, the iron buried deep. Instantly, the whale erupted. The sea exploded into foam. The line screamed from its tub. The boat lurched forward with terrifying speed. "Nantucket sleigh ride," shouted one sailor. The phrase hardly captured it. We were no longer pursuing. We were being carried. The whale dragged us across the ocean with immense, effortless power. Water sprayed over the bow. The line hissed. Men braced themselves against the strain. Ahead, the wounded giant ran. Behind, we followed whether we wished to or not. For long minutes, the creature towed us through a world reduced to speed, tension, and danger. Then, its strength began to fail. The runs shortened, the violence weakened. Starbuck stood, lance in hand. His face remained calm, almost sorrowful. He approached not as an executioner, but as a man performing difficult work. The final blows landed. The whale slowed, rolled, its great body turned partially upward. The sea around it reddened. Then came stillness, a silence, unlike ordinary silence, the silence that follows struggle. The whale floated beside us, dead. No cheers rose, no celebration, only exhaustion and wonder. Even Flask, usually incapable of solemnity, removed his hat. The creature's size overwhelmed comprehension. Its eye, fixed and dark, seemed strangely peaceful, as though death had removed some burden invisible to us. Back aboard the Pequod, the labor began, and labor proved far less romantic than hunting. Lines were attached, the carcass secured, knives sharpened, men sweated, orders flew. The whale that moments earlier had seemed almost mythic became work. Heavy work, dangerous work, necessary work. The body yielded oil, blubber, profit. The practical purpose of the voyage reasserted itself. Ahab watched much of it in silence. The transformation interested him, perhaps because it revealed the distance between ordinary whaling and his private obsession. This whale had been caught, killed, processed, its value measured, its mystery diminished. Moby-Dick would not submit so easily. That evening, Stubb insisted upon portions of whale meat for supper. The meal produced fierce debate. Some declared it excellent, others found it unpleasant. Stubb loved the argument more than the food. "Everything worth eating causes disagreement," he proclaimed. "Then perhaps disagreement is the real meal," I suggested. Stubb laughed. "There speaks a philosopher." "No." "Good. Philosophers are poor sailors." The laughter helped. Whaling required such moments. Without them, the work would become unbearable. Yet darker scenes followed. Sharks arrived. First a few, then dozens. Then what seemed like hundreds. They descended upon the carcass with frenzied appetite. The sea churned. Fins cut the water. Bodies collided. Teeth tore. The frenzy possessed a terrible purity. No hatred, no malice, only hunger. Watching them, I thought again of Ahab. The comparison felt uncomfortable and accurate. The sharks fed because they could do nothing else. Ahab pursued because he could do nothing else. Both obeyed necessities, invisible to themselves. Later, as darkness settled, I stood near the whale's severed head, suspended beside the ship. Moonlight touched it strangely. The massive shape seemed less dead than thoughtful. Its great eye reflected pale light. Its silence felt immense. Ahab approached. Together, we stared at the enormous head hanging above the sea. "What does it know?" he asked. I thought he spoke rhetorically. Perhaps he did. Yet he continued. "It moves through depths no man can enter." The moonlight sharpened the scar on his face. "It sees what we never will." "You believe that?" "I believe every creature carries its own world." He studied the whale. "Some worlds remain closed." For a long time, neither of us spoke. The sea rolled gently. The suspended head moved slightly with each swell. Finally, Ahab stepped closer. His voice dropped low, almost intimate. "You looked into the dark places," he said to the dead whale. "What did you find there?" No answer came. Only water, only moonlight, only silence. Yet Ahab remained staring, as though expecting revelation, as though every whale contained a fragment of the one he truly sought. The next morning, another ship appeared on the horizon. Another meeting, another exchange, another chance that news of the white whale might emerge from the endless network of stories connecting whalers across the globe. The Pequod altered course. Ahab came alive immediately. His posture changed. His eyes sharpened. The ordinary concerns of the ship fell away. There remained only one question. Had they seen him? The approaching vessel grew larger. Crewmen lined her rails. Voices carried faintly across the water. Ahab moved to the bow, waiting, hunting information now as fiercely as he hunted whales. Behind him stood Fadala, silent, watchful, certain. The two figures appeared bound together by some invisible thread stretching beyond the visible world. Captain and shadow, hunter and witness, destiny and prophecy. The sea between the ships narrowed. The question waited. And as the Pequod drew near, every soul aboard understood that the voyage had entered a new phase. The hunt was no longer merely pursuit. It was becoming communion with obsession. Every whale killed, every ship encountered, every storm endured, every mile traveled. All were being drawn into Ahab's expanding interpretation of reality. The world itself was becoming evidence, and evidence, once arranged by obsession, rarely points anywhere except toward its conclusion. You have reached the conclusion of Volume 3 of the Quantum Quill Story Edition of Moby-Dick. The voyage has entered darker waters. What began as a whaling expedition has become something far more complicated, far more dangerous, and far more personal. The crew of the Pequod has witnessed the growing power of Captain Ahab's obsession. The hunt for the white whale now shapes every decision, every horizon, and every encounter upon the sea. Hidden truths have emerged. The mysterious Fadala and Ahab's secret crew have revealed themselves. The ordinary routines of whaling have become intertwined with prophecy, symbolism, and fate. And the line separating practical purpose from consuming obsession has grown increasingly difficult to see. Along the way, Ishmael has continued to observe the extraordinary world around him, its beauty, its violence, and its mysteries. Through encounters with whales, distant ships, storms, and strange stories carried across the oceans, he has begun to understand that every sailor aboard the Pequod is navigating more than the sea. Each man is also navigating himself. Captain Ahab pursues the white whale. Starbuck struggles to preserve reason and duty. Stubb meets danger with humor. Flask embraces action. Queequeg remains steadfast in friendship and courage. And Ishmael continues his search for meaning amid forces far greater than any one person can control. Yet as this volume closes, one truth has become impossible to ignore. The hunt is changing everyone aboard. The voyage is no longer simply moving across the world. It is moving toward a reckoning. In Volume 4, the Pequod sails into increasingly remote and perilous waters. Encounters with other ships bring warnings, prophecies, and stories of loss. The white whale's influence grows stronger even in absence, and the consequences of Ahab's pursuit begin to touch every soul aboard. The ocean remains vast, the mysteries deepen, and somewhere beyond the horizon, the white whale continues his silent passage through the depths. The distance between hunter and hunted grows ever smaller,